Assalamu alaikum. Hello, my dear students. How are you all? Welcome to my biology class. So today we are going to learn from chapter 7. That means exchange of gases. And today our topic is human respiratory system. So let's start our class. So respiratory system, that means the organs which take part in respiration is called the respiratory system. So these are the organs which are related with the respiratory system: nasal and nasal passage, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus, lung, and diaphragm. So let's discuss one by one. And here is the overview. Here is a diagram of the total human respiratory system. See, from nose to lungs, diaphragms here, the nose, nostrils, nasopharynx, then larynx. Here is the larynx, and this region is called the pharynx, and then trachea, lungs, right lung, left lung, bronchi, bronchus, diaphragms. These are the alveolus. If you zoom here within the lung, you will find these things, okay, balloon like structure. So don't worry, I'm going to describe all these things elaborately. So let's start with the nasal cavity and nasal passage. So nasal cavity and nasal passage, the nose is the beginner of our respiratory system. Okay, uh, it is a triangular hollow organ situated above the buccal cavity. Buccal cavity means our mouth cavity. So now nasal cavity just located above the buccal cavity. It helps us to sense the smell of substances. A specific type of nerve in the nose stimulates the organ to give us the sense of smell. Okay, and its structure is such that it makes the inhaled air suitable to be received by the lungs. Okay, it helps us, or it makes the air suitable for our lungs. And the nasal passage, it extends from an aperture in front of the nose and up to the pharynx behind. And a thin partition that divides this nasal passage between into two nasal passage, and its front side is covered with cilia, and the rest part is lined by mucus producing membrane. Not only the cilia, there are some hairs also present at the very beginning of our nasal passage. It acts like filters. It filtrates the air, and here the cilia together with mucus within the nasal passage serves to trap the foreign substances like dust particles, germs. So these things act like traps. Okay, so before entering the lungs, this makes the air relatively free from dirt, and it also helps the inhaled air to pass through the nasal passage to become warm and moist, so that sudden cold air doesn't harm the lungs. Okay, so the main function of nostrils and nasal passages are air entering the respiratory organ through the nasal passage, and this nasal cavity is responsible for conditioning the air. Okay, so passing the air to the next organ, and also it provides the conditioning on the air. Okay, so and the conditioning means here the warming or cooling the air which is received by the nose. Okay, now pharynx. So this one is also known as nasopharynx. Uh, so pharynx actually, if we open our mouth, the pharynx can be seen at the back of the mouth. Just back, the behind portion of the open mouth is called the pharynx, and it extends behind the nasal passage to the upper part of the larynx. And at the back of the roof of the mouth, there is a small tongue-like part, which is called the soft palate. And the soft palate actually closes the backside of the nasal cavity and helps us to swallow or drink. Okay, And due to this soft palate, as food cannot come out through the nostrils. And another important function of the soft palate is mucus production. Okay, so it serves. So that means this nasopharynx or pharynx, it serves as a common passage for the transport of air to the larynx, and also it um, helps us to also food from the mouth to. It also actually maintain the food movement uh, mm, from the mouth to the esophagus. Okay, so this was all about pharynx, and now this is the larynx. It is the part of the respiratory tract between the nasopharynx and the trachea. Larynx. It is situated below the pharynx and at the top of the trachea. Okay, there are two folds of muscles situated on opposite side of the larynx, and these are the vocal cords. A flap of soft tissue at the back of the tongue is the epiglottis. Is called vocal cord. It acts as a lead at the time of taking food. During the time of taking food, it acts as a lead. It covers the opening of the larynx so that the food particles cannot enter the esophagus. But while keeping the larynx open during respiration, air can. But during the respiration, this larynx remain open, and it helps the air to get into lungs through this passage. Okay, that means it has no function in respiration directly, but larynx helps to warm and it also helps to warm and moisten the incoming air, and its epiglottis prevents food from entering the trachea, and this is also known as the voice box. Okay, because sound is generated here. Okay, so now the trachea, this is the hollow tube which lies in front of the esophagus. Okay, and extends from the larynx downward into the thoracic cavity. It is supported by incomplete rings of cartilages and smooth muscle. Here the incomplete rings of cartilages because they are C-shaped cartilages. Okay, C-shaped cartilages are present here in the trachea. The inner layer of the trachea is covered with mucous membrane and cilia. Okay, air flows through the trachea, but through the constant rhythmic beating of the cilia, that the trap dust, germs, and other particles are expelled. Okay, trachea usually the ranges, the diameter of the trachea is 2 to 2.5 centimeter, and usually they are 10 to 12 centimeter in length, and they have 15 to 20 C-shaped rings of cartilages. Okay, so trachea conducts air from the larynx to the bronchi, to the next part of the respiratory systems. It is internally lined by cilia. Okay, so now the bronchus, yes, bronchi or bronchus, you know, the trachea divides into two tubes called bronchi. Okay, one entering the left and another one entering to the lung. Okay, let me show you the diaphragm. Let me show the diagram here. See, this is the trachea here. The trachea is composed of C-shaped cartilages, 15 to 20 cartilages, and then the bronchi here, the two bronchus generated from the trachea, left and left bronchus. Right bronchus enter into the right lung, and left bronchus enter into the left lung. Here the interesting thing is, the left bronchi, this one is mm, the left bronchi, this one is narrower and longer and more horizontal than the right. Okay, because due to the presence of heart here, heart present here. Okay, this is the location of the heart. Due to this reason, left bronchus is narrower and longer and more horizontal than this right lungs. Okay, and irregular rings of cartilage surround the bronchi, whose walls also consist of smooth muscle. Once inside the lung, this bronchi split several ways, okay, forming tertiary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, okay. And the structure of the trachea and bronchi are similar. They're similar in their formation, okay. So that means the function of the bronchi is conduct air from the trachea to the from trachea to the lungs. This is all about bronchus. And another thing is diaphragm, a sheet of skeletal muscle, okay, the dome shaped muscular partition that separate thorax from abdomen anteriorly. Actually this diaphragm divides our body cavity into two portion, okay. Thorax and abdomen at rest attached to the lumen, and this thing is attached to the lumbar vertebrae and posteriorly to ribs, and performs an important role in respiration, okay. How they actually facilitates our respiration, that means our breathe in and breathe out. I will describe these things in our next lecture, so don't worry. So see here, this is the diaphragm, this is the diaphragm, and it plays a very vital role during the breathing, during our breathing, okay. So now let's talk about lungs. The features of lungs, mm, our lungs are the main respiratory organ, okay. And we have two lungs, the right and left lungs are situated on either side of the heart within the thoracic cavity, okay. Yeah, within the thoracic cavity, this is the position of the heart, and here is the right lung, here is the left lung. Just these two things are situated on either side of the heart, and they are spongy, soft, and light reddish in color, okay. They're reddish in color, soft and spongy in texture. The right lung is three lobed and the left one is two lobed, okay. This one is here, one, two, and three. See, these are the partitions, one, two. These two partitions make here divides it into three portions, three lobes. And here is the partition, this partition divides it into two lobes, okay, left lung. So actually the entire surface of the lung is covered in a double layered membrane which is named the pleura. Pleura is the outer covering of the lungs, and it has two layers, okay. And the space between the two layers contains a fluid, okay, because these fluids uh, saves lungs from friction as the lungs rub against the thorax during breathing movement. And our lungs always uh, mm, in- uh, uh, breathe in air and also breathe out air. That means constantly our lungs have to expand and contraction, expand and contract, expand, contract. So uh, rhythmic way, they have to breathe in and breathe out in a rhythmic way. That's why they these fluids that remains within the pleura protect our lungs from friction, okay. And the lungs contain numerous air sacs called the alveoli. See here, these are the air sacs, air balloon like structures called alveoli. So alveoli, small bronchioles and blood vessels contain the whole lung, actually constitutes the whole lungs, okay. Here the smaller bronchioles, the alveolar ducts terminates is alveoli. So air can enter from the nasal passage to the alveoli directly. And here the each balloon like structure actually and the wall of this each balloon like structure is composed of a single layer of epithelial tissue. The alveoli are surrounded by meshwork of capillaries. See, here is the diagram. If you zoom within the lung, you will get this thing, these figures. These are the alveoli. These are the balloon-like structure, which is surrounded by a network of capillaries, and the uh, wall of the alveolus are very thin. That's why mm, smoothly air can pass from blood capillaries to air can easily mm, mm, exchange between this alveoli and network of capillaries, okay. So when air enters the alveolus, it expands like a balloon and then later contracts automatically. The wall of the alveoli and blood capillaries are so thin that gaseous exchange occurs between them. Okay, so and mm, alveolus, alveolus, uh, and you can also call this alveolus as the functional and structural unit of the lungs. Okay, because why they are functional units? Because they perform the main function, the gaseous exchange between the air and the blood. Okay, and each alveolus is a hollow cup-shaped cavity of actually the diameter is 0.22 millimeter, and the thickness of the wall is zero point 0.1 micrometer. Okay, micrometer, that means 10 to the power minus 6 meter. So the walls of the alveolus are lined with simple squamous epithelial cells known as alveolar cell. That's why they are very thin and tiny. Okay, and uh, these alveolars are full of surfactants, a kind of fluid. Okay, and the surfactant, pulmonary surfactant, moistens these alveoli. Okay, okay, let me show you the diagram again. Uh, So this is the overall structure. These organs, actually all these organs are together. You can call all these organs together the human respiratory system. Okay. So the main respiratory organ here is the lungs, and all other organs actually helps these lungs to make its function, to make it functions like respiration, breathe in and breathe out mechanism, to make it continue, and mm, mm, keep the lungs for the proper functioning, like what are the functions of the lungs. Okay, let me tell you the functions of the lungs then. The primary function of the lung is the respiration. Okay? And the lungs take in oxygen, which the body cells need to live and carry out their normal functions. And the lungs also get rid of carbon dioxide, a waste product of the cells. Okay, so because the carbon dioxide which comes from all over the body, they come here within the lung, and then it passes it to the outer environment through this trachea, through these nostrils. So different types of protein, fat, and carbohydrates synthesis also takes place here in the lung tissue. Okay, so lung tissue also synthesize and remove so many waste particles even, and it inactivates different types of enzymes, hormones. Okay, so if I here let me show you the uh, sequences of the our respiratory system organs, from nose, then nasopharynx, then larynx, and then trachea, then bronchus, primary bronchus, and then here the secondary branches, secondary bronchus. Then it forms bronchioles, that means the tertiary bronchus, and then finally the terminal bronchus here, and at the very end point of this bronchus, you will found this thing alveolus, the air sac or the balloon-like structure alveolus. Okay, these are the alveolus. Okay, so I think this is the overall human respiratory systems and their associated organs. So in our next classes, we'll talk about the respiration mechanisms. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you all.